For this lecture, I wanted to talk quickly about teratogens or teratogens, depending upon how you pronounce them. During fetal development, when the fetus is growing and changing within the womb, there are specific things that women are instructed to stay away from, environments that they're encouraged to avoid. And one of the reasons why women are encouraged to do these things is because of these teratogens. Now, these are chemicals, environmental factors that will influence and possibly be harmful to the fetus during their early periods of development. What we have are behavioral teratogens. These are where exposure to these chemicals or these environments could actually result in maybe some cognitive delays, maybe even possibly some physical issues. While there are lots of things that women are encouraged to stay away from, and I'm sure that you can think anecdotally of what maybe your aunt or your friend or your niece has been asked to stay away from. Because the literature is still developing and growing about fetal development, the idea here is that there are some things that we should stay away from in order for the fetus to stay safe. And then there are some things that are okay to have in very small quantities. Now, not only does quantity matter, but the timing of exposure matters in influencing what might be some of the outcomes. Now, this is a slide that we have. This will be located under your course units information. This represents critical periods. What we see here is that exposure to teratogens during different periods of development can result in different outcomes. Let's just look at that top bar really quickly. If you look at the very top of the bar, it identifies the germinal period, the main embryonic period, and then the fetal period. And then we see 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, 5 week, 6 week, 7 week. And you'll notice, which I think is pretty important, is that between the 3rd week and basically the 16th week, that is a lot of development in just 12 weeks, where that entity goes from maybe a discombobulated mass of cells into a human representation of development. And what we see here on the central nervous system, if we look at that top bar, that orange period is the highly critical period where exposures during teratogens can have some very, very serious effects. Early on in 3, 4, 5, and 6 weeks of development, exposure to teratogens could actually result in neural tube defects, things like spina bifida, hydroencephalus. After about the 6th to 7th week, we start to the critical period shifts a little bit, and then we start to see not only the structures will not necessarily be harmed as much as their function. Neural tube defects would be an issue with structure. Mental retardation and learning disability would be an issue with function. Now you can see that the purple area is the least critical period, but is still effectual. It is still something that can cause harm. But you'll notice that by the end of the 16th week, everything sort of slows down and loses its critical mass as far as being vulnerable to exposure. Now, the terminologies listed within the colored bars represent the possible effects on organs and the physicality that might occur with some exposure to teratogens. Now, we talked about the behavioral teratogens. We've talked about the timing of exposure. The amount of exposure is really important as well. And we can counsel you, and some doctors say it's okay to have, 8 ounces of red wine once a week, and you wouldn't need to be concerned about affecting the fetus. But really, that amount of exposure is very dependent upon genetic vulnerability. It's like having an allergy or something else. If you have an inherent vulnerability to a chemical and you're exposed to that chemical, you are more likely to have some disastrous outcomes than maybe somebody who is more resistant. So when we talk about teratogens, it's really important to remember the timing of exposure, the amount of exposure. There may be some in small quantities that are okay, and then some people who have genetic hardiness, right, might be less vulnerable to some of those teratogens. Teratogens are very important to fetal development. Please make sure and reference your textbook to know the specific stages of fetal development. And also be sure to know that critical period slide. Till next time.